We want to welcome everyone to this week's ICEJ weekly webinar. We have an exciting topic. It's Thursday, 4 p.m. Jerusalem, and we're going to talk about developments over the past week or so of Israel to the rescue. The IDF and other Israeli rescue, humanitarian first responder organizations sending missions to Turkey after the devastating earthquakes there to try and dig people from the rubble. And the question is, how did this develop where Israel was always first on the scene? Even President Erdogan in Turkey, who hasn't had the best attitude towards Israel for about a decade, even he acknowledged that Israel was first there, even before a lot of Turkish rescue workers in some of these mountainous areas where the earthquake really hit hard. And the developments over this past week or so and bring us right up to date. My first guest to talk about this is Marco Moreno. He's a lieutenant colonel reserve in the IDF, was part of the Israeli intelligence. We can't speak so much about that, but he also pioneered, he organized and managed for 4 years one of these humanitarian relief efforts outside of Israel's borders. It happened to be just across the border of the Golan with Syria during the Syrian civil wars. 4 years of launching and managing the Operation Good Neighbor, and even some of our staff, they were part of that, operating an underground clinics, makeshift clinics in basements with bombs going off everywhere. But you had to work with the IDF, with Israeli medical teams, with Christian volunteers and others to bring humanitarian relief and medical services in parts of southern Syria, even with the fight going on around. That was quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, but just to be accurate, the only one that crossed the Israeli border into Syria as the medical field teams were Christians.
The IDF would leave stuff at the border, like food, baby diapers, baby food, and people on the other side that you were coordinating with, probably a lot of them Druze connections with the Druze village, coming and getting it, and make sure it was safe to do that.
First of all, when we started the operation, we decided as a policy that standoff, everything is standoff. Non-Israeli soldier cross the border inside Syria. Second, it will be on a humanitarian field, and we were providing whatever they need. And it was under like a strategic security umbrella. We won't talk about that today. Our relationship with the Druze, as you mentioned, the Druze in Syria are with the regime, against the opposition. So we wanted relationship with the Druze, but they were afraid of react to that. So we had other locals that helped us help themselves actually coordinate the serving aid that we gave.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to these missions on board fields, I think it goes back. I remember the first sort of big time that it hit the media was the first big earthquake in Turkey, I believe in 1999, where the IDF Home Front Command sent search and rescue units to Turkey to dig out people from rubble, and they were saving lives, and it made big news. And I don't know if it was going on before that, but since then it's really developed. You had the Haiti earthquake in around 2010, I believe, a big earthquake in Nepal, that a lot of Israeli rescuers, relief organizations went there. There was a big typhoon in the Philippines. Even in the U.S., this
Miami.
Yeah, near Miami, along the Atlantic coast, the surf side, a residential building collapsed, and Israelis went there to help dig people out. And now your Operation Good Neighbor was another good example. What is it in Israelis that says we got to go first? We got to be there on the scene and sort of project our goodwill in this way?
So good questions. Haven't thought about it. There is a difference between the Syrian project and the earthquakes that you just described, something else. But it's a good question why Israelis are first thing are being invited by those governments to come and help. Think about the US. It's not a terrible part of country of our state. I think Israelis has 2 or 3 things that are unique. One, our brand is that we are very, very professional rescue. We have a good army.
Your experiences have forced you to get very good.
Because we are a very experienced army. Because we are better. Because we are better. We have just a lot of experience. And for instance, we have the airplane F-35, which is an American airplane.
Latest generation stealth fighter bomber.
Yeah. And actually, only the Israeli Air Force is the one that has experience with this airplane. It's the
first one to use it in battle successfully. So
I hope and continue to be successful. And so our brand that we are very experienced and we have good reputation. But second, I think Israelis, we like to engage. Like when Israeli comes to the side, no talks, let's fight. That's the DNA of Israelis. You know, they don't come, okay, let's have coffee, let's eat something. No, just the rescue team, the rescue delegation that went to Turkey, upon their landing, by the way, they land and Iranian warplane was next.
It was an interesting moment.
Yeah, just bringing aid, not personnel, and they immediately went into the field and started rescue people. By the way, the Israeli delegation rescued 19 that, like, they broke the record in 19. So what it is, it's 19 people, 19 souls, you say. Yes, it's 19 all worth for someone. So that's the second thing. The third thing is Israelis, we like to help. Like, I think because, I think it's something in our historical DNA. The Jews, before we had the country, were very weak. Like, we got butchered in the house. And then the events fell during the history. And now we have a country, which is a powerful country. So we like to be in the power side and help those who need that. So I think those three things are why Israelis are.
You've seen this suffering, you want to go do something.
We want to help. We have the capability, we have the experience, we have everything you need, and just want to go.
And there's also this Jewish concept of tikkun olam,
True, but I don't know, honestly, if that's the main thing. I don't know when the army is getting a call, or when army guys seeing in the news that the earthquake happened and all the forces that went and took it, 99, 80% are reserve. So, we are tikkun olam, let's go. It's something else, because not everybody is religious.
Hope that relations are on the mend between Israel and Turkey over the past year or so. That there's been a sort of a shift, especially on Erdogan's side. With it was helpful that they allowed Israel in. Might not have been the case a couple of years ago.
Probably. First of all, Turkey is shifting, warming the relationship with Israel. You know why? Because the gas,
natural gas offshore. They want to get in on
the reason that the Israeli ambassador was, but it's only because we found gas. Politics, that we don't care. That's it. Second, I heard from the army guys, delegation that went to Turkey, they said they have been asked to take out the pad, they have a pad sheet with the flag.
Israel flag.
Just take it out because maybe it's sensitive with the the locals. But after 24 hours, once the local realized what the Israeli delegation is doing, actually working and saving people on the ground, so flag will be involved. Even I heard all us spoke someone and said, locals that got food, like a refugee or truck came and gave them food, he took half of his food and he gave it to us and offered it to us. He didn't say that. Mounted respect they got after. So, and I think that's the story of Israel. It's a perspective, it's a narrative. Ooh, those guys, blah, blah, blah. But once you get to know them on the ground, so those guys are.
Yeah, we're hearing these stories that rescue Israelis more than our own troops, our own officials.
What I'm hearing from Turkey, it's a catastrophe. It's just a chaos. Like the local authorities are non-functional at all. Like you can come close to the area of the earthquake without a problem. Not close. There isn't like a central command that distribute the. It's very chaos, like local chaos. I'm not talking about civil, the government. Okay, you got Israeli. Okay, in Israel you go there. Americans, you go there, and French, you go there. Everybody's doing whatever he wants. No, the Israelis, I heard them said we didn't have any engage with the locals. So okay, you go here or there. It's a lot of local authorities. Yeah, non-professional
In shock themselves.
Okay, shopless family members. But we told them, where's the army? Where is the police? It's a crisis. Someone needs to manage it.
They're threatening to invade Syria.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's like it's kind of tough. Think about it. They ruled the world. Yeah,
and this is also tough terrain, mountainous terrain. This after 5 days, the IDF search and rescue teams, United Hatzalah, been helping sponsor, and other groups that pulled out. There's a phase where you're doing search and rescue when you think people might be alive. I mean, they just pulled another 9 out even today, a week after it happened, 10 days after it happened. Almost. That's amazing.
Yeah, medical. But the rest search and rescue is pretty done. Well, it's like 7 days now.
Oh, temperature.
Now, so no one can survive that. And now the Israeli president's only medical staff, doctors, nurses, which are working in another version, meaning they are assisting the locals in their hospital because they have a problem with personnel. So I go, so the hospital, okay, we have surgery with you, need other guy, just coming in and out.
But the IDF front command has a military field.
Yeah, which is not very
some tents.
Yeah, it's small and it doesn't have all the medical necessity. It's injury kind of limited.
They set up one in Ukraine last year over near the border with Poland, and people flocked to it. And a lot of the Ukrainian Jewish community was taken there, but everyone was going there for treatment. But the IDF has this at the ready at all times, not only in case something happens within the nation, but I know they went and set up in Haiti. Yeah, even the media was drawn there because they were the only ones with an internet connection, so they could follow the reports. Became very popular.
Basically, this capability is for the army when it. That's some that scale. But
right,
yeah, we should try, but probably it won't happen, because every 100 years you have a reset.
Kind of all the same fault lines.
Yeah, I leave it there. The bed was shaking. Like
you felt
all. I woke up in the pause. The seconds to understand it's an upgrade, but it was done after like I've met with a and last time it happened in Israel, it's was totally destroyed almost 100 years. I don't know. We should wait and see what will happen if we have good buildings or bad. We know we have bad buildings. Israel, the boy. All buildings, probably the same as you see here.
No, this building, we talked to our landlord, and he said it was built, they pulled the permit after 1995, so it's built to earthquake.
Okay, let's hope it's not a crook and that should bring an engineer to do some exam, but it's always, you cannot run from an earthquake.
Yeah, I think this is a new burgeoning field, earthquake, Look, you have the phase of search and rescue, and then when you just make an assessment, it's hard to find anyone else still alive down there. Pulled from it, they didn't think it had survived, and all of a sudden it starts coughing and crying, and there's video on that. It's quite amazing.
There was a story also about two sisters that someone heard a building, the Israeli came, said there was someone here, and there is a protocol when the officer is peace, meaning everybody quiet. So the Turks learned, because these are as shouting, shake it, quiet in Hebrew. So the Turks learned shake it, meaning everybody's, and then they heard something, and they worked like for almost 24 hours, drilling down. The two sisters were on the 7th floor and came to the 1st floor. Imagine 7th floor, they went under the bed, found and that saved them. And they stayed 3 days under the bed until the rescue reached them. And that 3 days under the bed without any, of course, any food and water, without any possibility to move even. And a little bit air. They said, and those two girls, by the way, told them, listen, there's another one, like a father and a daughter. So it was, I heard the officer that they said, it's a miracle. Our audience back home to understand, it can be also very traumatic for the rescue team. Think about it. All of the rescue team, or the majority of them, are reserved. It's a lawyer, it's an accountant, it's someone. It's sort of the lives they have family. Each one of them suddenly just get called in the morning. Oh, guys, put your uniform on, come to the up, then we fly. And they see. They have a protocol in the rescue delegation. Every evening they do a session. One session, they're talking about it. They have psychological sort of therapy, sort of therapy to process it and ventilize it, because it's, it's trauma. People just go back home, when you see that. What we when we see the news, we start to cry. They give me that.
This is the downside of all the experience Israel has. The search and rescue, you assessing, there really probably not many alive, and you won't find any more people trapped alive. But it was like after 5 days, most of the Israeli search and rescue pulled out. And some of the media reports said, look, they linked it to threats from maybe ISIS or other local militias. But there was also a real anger and frustration among local communities that against their government, because they weren't acting. It was chaos. They weren't doing enough. The Israelis were doing better. And I've heard that they were even trying to force these Israeli rescue workers, you got to come and dig in my building because my wife's in there, my daughter.
Because the Israelis are not controlling the situation. No, the Israeli delegation, it came back not because of threat, it's all fake news. Came back because they don't have anything to do. It's like, since they said it's done.
It's done. They found some other people in some other areas, but it was other rescue teams that arrived later, and there was...
And by then, there's like almost about 100, 150 personnel, medical people that still are.
Yeah.
And that they will last.
And the search and rescue phase ends, then you turn to medical, treating all the people who've been wounded, and the humanitarian aid relief, which the UN,
That's the humanitarian. That's
which we're still involved in some.
Yeah.
I understand the small Jewish community in one of these mountain villages that had been,
as I was there with
destroyed, synagogue destroyed, and were Jaffe.
now it's the time for an organization like you guys more than ever. Those poor people, because now it's there. Now it became simple. All the problematic chaos, and then now people need to eat, sleep, fly. I don't want to say recover their life, how can you recover from that? But as you know, you can when you need help.
But it takes a sort of a special kind of person to just go at a moment's notice and go try and save lives. I know the Christian medical team that you helped to organize to go across the border in Syria, they had to have a special courage to go.
All of them is special courage. First of all, it was 95% girl. So I was shocked.
Really, it's all nurses,
All of female.
all female
Doctors, nurses, whatever.
volunteers.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yes, and it was only female, not only 95%. That the second, it was shocking for me as an experience. I mean, it was, they were young, like they, and I, without any military background, without any military prep,
and no idea what they were stepping in.
small backpack on their back with short letters, just walking in the night through the border, and driving to horrific places, like the most dangerous places of that time. It was amazing.
Okay.
So for the ladies here, good job.
No, Syria well. There was a large part of Syria in the north that was impacted by this earthquake. There's similar problems, humanitarian disaster.
Much more than Turkey. Much more.
How's it going to play out in Syria?
And
The civil war has already devastated the country.
Syria was already given. It's a Sunni area, meaning Bashar al-Assad.
Well, the regime.
In any case, it's not in control. Not it doesn't care, but any capability to.
So you have to go into Turkey to get in there. Turkey,
Yes.
you got to go.
And if you think Turkey is chaotic and, balagan, as we said, think what's going on in Syria, right? 10 times more. 10 times more.
So you don't think your sources and IDF and all, there was really no credible, like from an Islamist militia or maybe some of these gangs who control certain areas near the border, so that there's been this conflict and it's spilled over some into Turkey. None of that. The Israeli rescue workers weren't credible.
No, they went with good security detail. No, that's
But there's a lot of anger and frustration by their locals against Turkish government and Turkish authorities for not really doing more and getting a handle on the situation. Okay. We want to thank Marco Moreno. We've had pleasure talking to him. He is our the former lieutenant colonel in the IDF, in the reserves now, and an intelligence officer. And he pioneered, he launched and oversaw Operation Good Neighbor from 2012 through around 2016, where the IDF and Israeli authorities cooperated to get humanitarian aid into parts of southern Syria during the Syrian civil war, and also to help organize teams of medical doctors and nurses and such, and most of them were women, to get into there. So he's a real veteran of some of these humanitarian missions. And we thank you for your time. And we're going to be right back in just a moment with my next guest, Raphael Poch of United Hatzalah.
You can help Turkey today. Join the earthquake relief efforts with the ICEJ and Israel's top responders. Go to donate.icej.org and choose International Relief Fund from the drop-down to designate your gift to Turkey.
Welcome back to the ICEJ weekly webinar. I'm David Parsons, one of the vice presidents and senior spokesman for the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. And this week we're talking about Israel to the rescue. The news reports over recent days how Israel sent search and rescue teams, medical teams to Turkey to help with all the victims of the very horrible earthquakes. There were several major earthquakes early last week, and Israel was first on the scene. There's a whole history of this. And our guest on this part of the program is Raphael Poch. He's the international spokesman for United Hatzalah. Good to have you, Raphael.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we're talking to him, first of all, because they had a whole medical team and search and rescue team there in Turkey, pulling people from the rubble, babies, little girls, old grandparents, everyone. It was quite dramatic, quite touching and humane. But I think we first want to explain a little about who United Hatzalah is. And for those who don't know, they're like the first responders, paramedics, EMTs, that they all over Israel, they have over 6,000 volunteers, and a lot of them have these mopeds. They're like an ambulance, a little motorcycle ambulance with medical kit on it. And they are the first to arrive on the scene of any accident or any terror attack. I've experienced myself. My wife needed, we had to call emergency on a Shabbat, and within 5 minutes, United Hatzalah was there about 20 minutes before Magen David Adom, and no police, no one else. They were there first. They're always the first to sign. It's average of like 3 minutes. So this is like globally, you are the fastest first responders there are.
All right, thank you for that. I'm sorry it took 5 minutes to get to your wife. Usually, like you said, we're usually in 3 minutes, and in cities like Jerusalem, we're even usually a little bit faster than that.
It was Shabbat, we understand.
Even on Shabbat, it doesn't matter. We're active, full week around, 24/7, 365 days a year. But yeah, usually we're the first on scene. I myself drive one of our ambi-cycles. It's what we call the motorcycle, where it has the medical equipment, because it's ambu for the ambulance and then cycle for the motorcycle. We put them together. And we have 6,500 volunteers around the country. We've kind of essentially created a flash mob of life saving, where when an emergency happens, we alert the 5 or 10 closest responders. We also put that on a radio channel, so the people who are a little further away but might be already driving or already riding the ambi-cycles would be able to get there maybe even faster than someone who's located closer, but would have to go down to get their car, or get their medical equipment from their car, and then run over. Sometimes even people a little further away might get it. So we have 2 kind of stages of notification. There's an app that goes out based on GPS location, kind of like Uber, and whoever picks it up first goes. So the 5 first people who pick it up go. And then there's also people who get the radio channel and a little further away can get there faster if they're in an ambi-cycle or a bike or a car or whatever it happens to be. We get there, we treat the patient. We have the first responders of all the medical equipment that's on an ambulance itself. Obviously not the bed or the stretcher, because those don't fit on a motorcycle or in a person's personal car. But we get there, we treat the patient, try and stabilize them. When the ambulance comes, we help them transport the patient to the ambulance, and they take them to the hospital for the next level of care. The system works very well, was developed back in the 80s here in Israel, a little bit before that, even in the States with different groups. And it's a community-based first response, because no organization, no government in the world can put an ambulance on every street corner. It's not effective. It's not a good use of resources. But what we can do is we can train a volunteer and give them medical supplies and have them be on every street corner around the world, around the country, maybe even around the world. Sometimes even more than one. I know in the place that I live, in the town that I live in, Efrat, which is just south of Jerusalem, on my street, I think we have a street. It's apartment buildings, and I think in every building there's at least one volunteer, more or less, on the street. I think there's one that doesn't have. There's about 15 buildings on our street, and every single one of them has a volunteer in it. So it's really to that level, and it's empowering the community, engaging the community to be the first responders until the government system or the local regional system, whatever it happens to be, the regular ambulance service can show up. It takes even good systems takes about 7 to 10 minutes. Fast ones, slower ones obviously take a lot more. And until the ambulance can get there, there's already someone treating the patient, stabilizing them, helping the person, performing the Heimlich maneuver if it's choking, giving them aspirin if it's a cardiac arrest, or any other interventions that's able to be happening in the first level, in the first few minutes, in order to begin CPR if it's the case, attach a defibrillator, and help save the person's life until the ambulance can arrive. That's the main goal of the organization. Because we're from the community, we've also seen other needs and other elements. And one of the ethos of the organization is that if we see a need, we try and fill it. So we saw the need that ambulance was taking too long, so we provided this idea of the first responder coming before the ambulance. There are other needs that we saw based on the community, where we have elderly people living on their own who are not getting medical checkups on a regular basis, who aren't able to go to the doctor, who don't have people coming to visit them. They feel lonely, they feel alone, a little bit abandoned by society. So we started a project called the Giving Honor Project, or Giving Respect, really, a better translation. And what we do is we send volunteers who are trained to visit these elderly people once a week. The volunteer kind of like adopts the elderly person and goes and visits that same person every week. Once a week, they build up a relationship, they build up a rapport. They go and provide them with a free medical checkup, check their vital signs, make sure their blood pressure is okay, their pulse, oxygen level, make sure they're eating well, make sure they're taken care of. If they look around the apartment to see if there's any, or house, to see if there's anything broken and anything needs fixing. And they spend at least an hour a week with them to alleviate their sense of loneliness, and so they can feel part of society, feel a connection to their community. And it's something we saw from, unfortunately, a lot of cases where elderly people passed away. No one knew about the fact that they passed away until they started smelling, the neighbors started smelling the dead body there. And we realized this was a problem around Israel, so we started to develop this program, and thankfully it's active now in more than 50 cities across the country.
Very good. We have something similar with an Israeli partner where it's a call center for Holocaust survivors. They do tend to get reclusive in their homes, but you can be very proud of United, Hatzalah, Raphael. I know that when we called, you dial I think 100 is police, 101 is emergency, that you get the alert as well. The dispatcher sends it to Magen David, but you also get it, and you've got this system set up that and these volunteers are like...
We have our own volunteers.
And your volunteers are like, they're teachers, they're doctors, they're lawyers or whatever, but they take medical training and are on call all the time to respond in their specific area. That's amazing.
There's one fellow. We have 6,500 volunteers. Each does their own thing. They have their own professions, their own lives. They put everything on hold when the emergency comes in, drop whatever they're doing, and go out to try and save somebody.
Yeah. When they came to our house, the test they gave to my wife, she had collapsed, and the test they gave her, looking at her eyes, doing this and this. When the next medical team from Magen David or Adam arrived around 20 minutes later, they did the very same test. So your guys, it just showed me you're well-trained first responders, and it is a great service that you do for Israel. But you have now extended this to other countries where you sent your top search and rescue guys, medical and all, to Turkey after this earthquake. When did United Hatzalah get into foreign missions like this?
I think the first one we went on with a very small group was in 2010. The
Haiti earthquake.
Yeah. With first Haiti earthquake. We've been to a couple. That was the first time. The organization was founded in 2006, and in 2010 we sent a delegate, a very small delegation. I think it was 2 or 3 people to Haiti to sort of see how they could help. And they realized that at the time there was a very immense project. They needed a lot of resources to help. So over the years, as the organization grew and our resources grew, we started developing kind of a system of different elements that would go to help in international rescues. One of them is the search and rescue unit, which we work together with under the Israel Rescue Coalition. We work together, United Hatzalah works together with the Israel Rescue Unit throughout Israel, and we do specialized training to do search and rescue operations in harsh conditions. We often train in the desert here in Israel, more in the north in the wintertime when it's cold. Obviously in mountainous areas where there's no access by roads, and how do we get there? So there's a lot of training in the search and rescue field. We also have urban search and rescue training where people go missing, we have missing people. So we have a division or a unit that specializes in that. We now have a Jeep unit, which also does difficult terrain rescues. And we also have, obviously, the medical side. The medical aspect is broken down into 2 sections during an international rescue mission. One side is the physical, what we call the physical medicine. And that's treating people for injuries. In cases of Turkey, we had a lot of hypothermia. We had a lot of hand injuries because people kept trying to dig through the rubble with their bare hands to get to their loved ones. So a lot of injuries to hands, the limbs. The scenes that we saw there were people, like the rubble was in piles with parts collapsing. So there were a lot of crush injuries where people fell off of or slipped off of the piles of rubble trying to get to their loved ones. So we had fall injuries, etc. And those were the people who weren't trapped in Turkey. But there's a big need for a medical team to go to these missions as well. But in addition to the physical, what we call the physical medical team, we also have the psychological team.
Yes.
And a few years back, we had a woman who was one of our volunteers, and this goes back to the innovation aspect of the organization. A woman who was one of our volunteers happened to be a family therapist. That was her profession. She's a family therapist, but she's also an EMT. And she got hit by a car. A very light injury. The car managed to stop shortly after hitting her. Wasn't very hard hit. And she got up and walked away. But the people who were around her neighbors, those who saw the car accident, they were traumatized by what they saw. Suddenly they're walking, down the street that they left. A woman gets hit by a car and knocked over. It traumatized them a little bit. And she noticed, and as a therapist, she was sensitive to that. She said, if people were traumatized witnessing an event that didn't even happen to them, how much more so would they be traumatized if they witness a medical emergency, whether it's a car accident, a terror attack, or even just something as simple as, a child not waking up from their nap, which unfortunately happens also, or the sudden death of a loved one, where it's something that does connect to them and it does hit home in their family, in their home. They have a personal connection. They're a lot more traumatized by that psychologically and emotionally. And she realized at that point that we need to not only provide physical first aid, but also psychological first aid. She then went to develop a plan with a couple of experts in the field of psychological first aid here in Israel, and what we call psychotrauma and resiliency. And that is a field which is very important here in Israel because a lot of people in Israel suffer from PTSD to the continuing conflict with the Palestinians. Back and forth, people living under threat of rocket attacks, people having witnessed terror attacks, even people having gone through regular military service can often be traumatized afterwards. There's a statistic that about 80% of Israelis have PTSD of some sort or another. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've seen that. And so traumatic medical emergencies, not just the medical first responders, but also the psychological first responders, which is a specialized unit called the Psychotrauma Crisis Response Unit. That unit started in 2016 with 30 people, and we developed it to today. It's now more than 500. These people are psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, social workers on the what we call the advanced level responders, similar to having doctors or paramedics on the medical side. And we have the basic level responders, people who are EMTs, but take extra training to become proficient in providing psychological first aid in the field. And we have, between the two of them, we have about 500 responders like this. So this team is pretty much always an element going to international rescue missions, because when we send international rescue missions, it's for a major disaster that people experience.
Yeah.
Often leaves trauma. So since the inception of that unit, that has been part of all of our missions around the world. They didn't get to Nepal. Nepal started, we sent the mission to Nepal in 2015 during their earthquake. But since 2016, when we went to Hurricanes Harvey and Irma 2017, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting 2018, once again to Haiti, and then in coming up with in 2020 we didn't send anyone anywhere because of Corona, but in 2021, when the Surfside building collapse took place, we sent the team, and then of course in Florida, yeah. And then, of course, with the Ukraine war, we did something we never thought we would do. We ended up sending a delegation like no other. We had 200 people, 200 volunteers going in and out of Ukraine, in Moldova, in the border country, helping refugees during the refugee crisis, the first 2 months of the war. They were basically cycling in and out, back and forth from Israel to Moldova, providing humanitarian aid, psychological first aid to the refugees, food, clothing, water, shelter, whatever we could help them with in Moldova on the borders, we did. And then we turned around and we flew 3,000 of them back to Israel. We ended up renting, we started out with one plane, which we sent a team of 50 volunteers to Moldova with I don't know, it must have been like 20 or 30 tons of supplies that were donated. And the plane, since it was going to Moldova already, it turned around and brought back refugees. And we said, this is a good way to go. We'll send a plane with volunteers and humanitarian aid, and we'll bring back refugees. And we did that every 2 days throughout the first 2 months of the war. So we ended up sending about 35 planes back and forth, and we brought 3,000 refugees to Israel from the war.
Korakavod, very good. We want to talk about Turkey, what you did there. Sure. The Christian embassy started raising funds to partner with you because you had sent a search and rescue mission there. I think you also have some humanitarian aid and medical teams that are still going to be going. So that appeal is still ongoing. We partnered in the past. I think the Philippines typhoon, we had a doctors association. In Haiti, we partnered with Zaka, which collects body parts, but their first responders as well, coming on the scenes of accidents, have some training in this. We've partnered with some others. We just had earlier in the program, Marco Moreno, who oversaw Operation Good Neighbor in Syria, Israeli sort of led humanitarian mission there, medical mission. But this time we partnered with United Hatzalah. It's quite amazing what you've done in less than 20 years in building this organization and really being the model, the global model for first response. I really have to say that, Raphael. You should be proud of that. But what happened in Turkey? What are some of the stories of people rescued and the response from the locals?
Okay, so Turkey, the earthquake happened at 3 o'clock in the morning, Turkey time. I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning here, 2. I don't remember. They're an hour forward, so I think it's 2 o'clock in the morning here. As soon as we heard about it, we basically started making plans to have a team head out. We had to figure out what exactly a team was going to look like.
In the middle of the night.
Middle of the night. I mean, we operate 24/7. So we woke up our vice president of operations, who was happily sleeping. That listen, we have this situation, we got to go. And we went. We basically took the next day to prepare volunteers, a list of who we were going to send and how we were going to send them, because that was a challenge as well. And getting all the logistics in order, connecting with the Israel Foreign Office and Defense Ministry in order to coordinate efforts, because we knew they were sending a team through the IDF Home Front Commands. They sent quite a large team. They sent about 400 people. And we put our team together. We got a team of 10 search and rescue experts from different search and rescue units across the country, everywhere from Eilat to the Golan Heights. People came. We contacted one of our volunteers because, like I said, we have 6,500 volunteers, all of which have their own professions. One of our volunteers is a reserve major in the IDF Home Front Command. He was not part of the IDF mission, so we asked him to be part of our mission and run the team. He agreed. This is something he's very familiar with doing through his military service. With the search and rescue team members, it was 10. And then we had 15 members of the medical team, a number of doctors, paramedics, EMTs. Each one has, kind of had to wear a second hat. Because you have limited resources when you're on the ground at a rescue mission, you usually want to send people who have the most possible training. So each one had training in digging rescue operations, which we've done in partnership with Home Front Command. We have a special training program like that, where we use their tools. We work together with the engineers to go through the building, the destruction zone, and get through concrete, cut through rebar. And learning how to do that already before they've even gotten to this mission. So they walked in with that knowledge. A lot of them were already members of the psychotrauma crisis response unit as well. We sent some psychologists together with the doctors to provide expert care there. And a lot of them also have special technical training. One of the EMTs who went has a specialty running our drone system. And the drones were actually very useful because of their thermal imaging cameras. And through that, we were able to locate actually 3 people who were still alive. Just by sending the drone up into the air with the thermal cameras, we were able to pinpoint where exactly they were in the rubble and get them out.
That's amazing technology.
Yeah, that was very essential as well. And so each of them had like different hats, and we handpicked a team to go. They also had to be people who were okay roughing it, because there was nothing in Turkey. The Turkish government set up a liaison for all of the different international rescue organizations. They were coordinating efforts of which organization was going where. They gave us a big field to sleep in, and we were on our own for everything else. So sub-zero temperatures, we brought sleeping bags, we brought tents, and we set up camp. We set up camp right next to where the IDF set up camp. So we could cut down on security resources between the two of us. And we got to work. And within 24 hours, we were already on the ground. And we started working with the digging. Over the next 6 days that we were there, we managed to find, rescue, and extricate and treat 15 survivors. Even going up to 6 days after the earthquake itself, we still found 1 or 2 people alive, and that was immense. Now we're a few days even after that. We're 10 days out almost, and those that we've rescued are recovering in hospital. They've recovered enough. They've started sending us thank you videos, saying thank you to the rescuers for getting them out, for finding them. In a lot of the cases, it's very difficult because it's one thing to locate the person. That's already its own difficulties. Then after you locate them, you have to get to them. So we worked hand in hand with the IDF Home Front Commands, with the Turkish Red Cross, with liaison, government liaison, their services, going through the rubble, finding them, getting to them, doing whatever it needed to do in terms of construction and digging to get to them. Using cranes, using bulldozers, jackhammers, whatever it happened to be, to cut through the rubble and finally get to them. But once we got to them, then we had to stop. Because what ends up happening is when a person is caught in an earthquake, if they're in an air pocket where the building collapses around them and there's a pocket of air and they're not hit by anything, that's already a big miracle, and they can manage to survive for a little bit. After time goes by, sub-zero temperatures with no water, no food, nothing to occupy them, it becomes much more difficult to survive. As time goes on, it becomes more and more difficult. But that's the good cases. The bad cases are when a person survives, but something does fall on them. And their arm is crushed, their leg is crushed, even their torso or their part of the skull. Not to get too graphic or anything, but one of the big challenges is then in those cases, how do we get them out? We have to lift up the thing that fell on them, that's pushing them, pinning them down. But just the action of lifting that up can actually kill them. Because that item that's fallen on them creates what's called a crush injury. And that's, it cuts off blood circulation in certain areas. When you lift it up, the blood circulation flows, and if there's an open wound, the blood can flow right out. Also, when part of the body is crushed and it doesn't receive oxygen for a while, it can start building up an actual poison inside the body. And when you lift the beam up, that poison can then spread to the rest of the body. So the first thing that the rescue units have to do when they get to the person is not just suddenly drag them out of the rubble. It's actually get them to be checked out by a doctor at the scene to see if they're okay to be dragged out of the rubble, because the simple action of dragging them out or lifting up that heavy object can be what kills them, especially after being there for 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 days with no fluids. You're talking about people who have very little fluid left in their body and suffering hypothermia. So going through that, we had to make sure that the doctor checked them before we even touched them. So our doctors who work in hospitals, they have their own medical practices or clinics, had to crawl through the rubble the same way the rescue teams did, get to the patient, start treatment before we lifted up the heavy objects or drag them out, provide them with fluids, put on tourniquets, close up wounds with bandages, and only then could we remove the person from the ring.
They're risking their lives as well.
Absolutely. 100% risking their lives. Obviously, the engineers who were doing the digging were trying to do as good a job as they could to make sure that the risk was nominal. But in essence, they are definitely risking their own lives to go save others a couple countries over. So it was something that's kind of heroic from that standpoint. Now, like I said, they did this 15 times. So over a 6-day period, that's about 3 people a day. It was quite emotional for everybody.
I think there were 19 people rescued by some of the different Israeli units, and you were involved in the United Hatzalah in 15 of those rescues.
The IDF was kind of like the all-encompassing unit that all the Israeli ones kind of attached themselves to, because they were the biggest. They rescued 19 total. Of those 19, 4 of them were rescued within the first day before we got there. Mm-hmm. They worked fast because they got there in 12 hours. So their first team, and they started doing their operations, deploying people as best they could. Had their own small medical team as well. And then when we joined, we were a force multiplier for them, both in the rescue efforts and of course with the medical team. Yes. Our drone team. So it's a very big force multiplier. We worked together. Those 15 others were done together in cooperation between us and them and the Turkish Red Cross.
Do you know if some of the other, Austria sent teams? I think, I don't know what all countries, there were quite a few, but there were these capabilities, like these drones that could see in the rubble?
A lot of them do. Also, we have to remember that Turkey is one of the world leaders of when there's in sending disaster teams to different countries. They're very, very well equipped. They have a very robust team. The Red Cross in Turkey is incredibly effective.
The Red Crescent.
Their teams are also Red Crescent, right? Sorry, Red Crescent. So they're very effective and have a lot of know-how and skill and technology, and we learned a lot from them as well in this thing. So they're no slouches for sure. Far from it.
Were they on the scene? Were they really loud in other areas? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. But the challenge was that the devastation was so widespread over such a large area in Turkey that there was, even with all the equipment and the training and the people that Turkey had, they needed a lot of help. And even with all the international teams that came in, there was still a lot more that could have been done if we had more resources. And it was a challenge. Everyone wanted to come and help. Everyone wanted to send resources. I think there was a list, an infographic somewhere I saw online, where I think there was close to 100 countries sent delegations or resources of some sort or another. There's firefighters from Los Angeles who are hanging out in Turkey right now doing rescues. So people came from all over. Interestingly enough, from I guess the humanistic aspect, when our team landed, we flew in. We took our own private plane and rented it, and together, we rented it from El Al, and we flew into Turkey. And when we landed, we tried to land at an airport as close to the disaster zone as we could. We didn't want to go to Ankara or Istanbul because they're way too far west. We went to a town called Gaziantep, which I'd never heard of before in my life, but they had a working airport. We landed there. This was the closest to the rescue scene, and we wouldn't have to drive to the disaster zone, because one of the resources that was mostly lacking in Turkey in that area after the earthquake was gasoline. So we didn't want to have to send a rescue team and then drive them 10 to 12 hours across the country and waste gas. There just wasn't any gas to be had. So we drove as close as we possibly could, rented a bus and a truck to carry the equipment. We brought 10 tons of medical equipment with us, a little bit of humanitarian aid, but mostly medical equipment with us. And we drove right to the disaster scene, right for as far as we could. I think it was a 2 to 3 hour drive. The team basically started going right away. And what we saw at the airport was already the most telling thing about this whole mission, was that the unity of the world coming together to help Turkey in their time of need. And what I mean by that is that there were 3 planes that landed one after the other in this airport in Gaziantep. The 3 planes were Israel, Qatar, and Iran.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is the photo of the Israeli plane sitting by the Arabian plane.
Exactly. And that was our plane that landed there. And as we came down off the tarmac, we see the other teams, Qatar and Iran, sitting right there. Iran and Israel, the governments are not friends. The people are people, no matter where they are. We've definitely had, nothing wrong with any people anywhere in the world. The unity that came together from just those 3 planes, already seeing each other, knowing the other, that we're all there for the same reason, to help, people we don't know, people in a different country, but people who need our services, was absolutely amazing.
Did you give each other thumbs up? Was there any interaction?
Yeah, there was nodding, acknowledging,
Now,
just with Poch, but we speak different languages literally, but there was definitely sort of nodding of the heads and not acknowledging that the other one's there and wishing each other well and, rescues. We went to
the fist bumps like President Biden.
There may have been. I wasn't present, but it was definitely an interesting meeting that took place.
That's interesting. Tell us, what was the response of the local Turkish peoples to your presence? They saw your little Israeli flags on your uniforms, your outfits.
The presence was amazing. People were very warm. They were welcoming. They didn't have anything to give us, and we didn't ask for anything. That wasn't our point. But they were incredibly thankful and appreciative of what we did, and when we, managed to pull a rescue and save somebody from the rubble. There was mass screaming of Allahu Akbar. The God is great in both in Arabic and Turkish, and Turkey's not an Arab country, but they're still speaking a language that's very similar, and that phrase goes through all I think Islamic countries. People were shouting and joyous and thankful, and people came up to us and thanked us for saving their neighbors, their family members, asking us to come and help them, looking in a building a little further away, thinking they know where their neighbors might be, and trying to locate them. If they could hear something or knew that someone was alive, then they would try and get our help with that. And we were obviously more than happy to be able to do that when and where we could. Like I said, resources were, even though we came with 25 people, the IDF came with 400, and there were many other countries coming with their own groups. Resources were still very limited for the amount of devastation that was around us. So unfortunately, we weren't able to help everybody. One of the most challenging things, I think, for us was when we were searching through the rubble, in order to hear if there was someone asking for help, often you can't hear voices because they're buried far below. So what people were able to do, because it's all the same building that collapsed, they were able to knock on pipes or knock on walls, and we would try and listen for that. So we had to quiet down all the requests for help from the people who were alive, who survived, who were on the street. Even the noise on the street, we had to tell people to be quiet in order to try and listen for those who were surviving and buried underground, because often the noises would be very, very faint. We managed, if you have to hear people and get them out. Like I said, we used the drone technology as well. The IDF brought dogs, like search and rescue dogs. And obviously we went by what the locals told us, where they thought, their family members would be in this building or in the other building, where in the building their bedroom was, so that we could locate possibly where it would go. And whatever system we could in terms of trying to get to them, that's what we did.
Yeah, I think two questions. One of them very important about these concerning reports that after 5-6 days, all the Israeli rescue teams had to be evacuated because there were threats from ISIS or other militias or some sort of threats against your life. And the second, what is United Hatzalah still doing in Turkey if people are interested in supporting your efforts through the Christian Embassy?
Gotcha. Okay, so in terms of the threats, there's been a kind of like a censorship placed on the whole issue.
Okay.
I can't talk about it too much. There were threats that were not only against the Israeli team, but against rescue teams in general. After an assessment with the IDF, we made the decision for our team to leave early. We were supposed to stay for a total of 10 days. We left after 6 because it was becoming too volatile. A lot of people at the location were very upset at the Turkish government for how they were handling things in terms of when they were going to decide it was going to be a recovery rather than rescue, whether it was going to be how much resources were going to each place, and they wanted to get to their loved ones.
And the mass graves were a problem, right?
Right. They once there was the declaration that was going to be the way that the government was going to handle things, people got very upset. In order to try and find their loved ones before the mass grave decision was going to be made or put in place, they started lashing out to an extent. And in those cases, it became dangerous for rescue workers to be there. In some instances, they were forcing a mob surrounded a group of rescue workers and forced them to dig to try and find certain bodies in different buildings. And they weren't doing it from a case of animosity to the rescue workers. They're doing it from a case of they just wanted to find their loved ones. And that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a dangerous element and situation.
But I know that in Turkey, there's a history also, people in some of these more remote regions that they get kidnapped and held for ransom. It happens in a lot of parts.
Right. So from the get-go of our mission, we knew that was going to be a possibility, that there was always that overseeing threat because it is southeast Turkey and it's close to the Syrian border. And there are some ISIS supporters in the area and other groups that don't look so kindly specifically on Israel. For us, it was an added element of danger. And between those two elements, we said it was unsafe for our team to stay, and we pulled our team back.
I know that's a popular profession among some of the Bedouin in the Sinai too, trying to kidnap people, hold them for ransom down there. But what are you going to continue doing there? I understand there is some.
We're assessing with our contacts there what the current needs are. Most of the search and rescue operations at this point have ceased across the board. We weren't the only country to leave, by the way. The German delegation left. The Austrian delegation was held up for a day and weren't able to leave, but I think they restarted their efforts at some point. And there were others. Our team, when we left, we basically came back to Israel, and we're still currently undergoing reassessment with the Turkish authorities, with the foreign ministry, to see if there is a need for additional medical or humanitarian aid. And if that's the case, then we have sort of a plan in place to already send a second team. We're waiting to hear back whether it's necessary and whether it's needed and in what capacity. And if that does come of, if that need is there, then we will answer it.
So if Israel were to have an earthquake now, we pray totally against it, but if it were a bad earthquake, do you think some of these Turkish rescuers, very interesting to hear you say they have good rescue teams, good search teams, would you expect some of them to come and volunteer to help here?
I would hope that people help. I hope to God. But in a case where there's a disaster here, thankfully, I think Israel has a lot of friends in this field. Israel is usually one of the first countries to help out a lot of disaster zones around the planet. So I think hopefully we'll be able to receive that help when it's needed. We saw it with the Carmel fires, with the big forest fires that were happening a number of years ago.
Yes.
Well, that people came from all over the countries from Mediterranean, all of it to help with the fire. Like what I would say with the only solution, the only healing that's really available in the case of a devastating disaster of a scale of this magnitude is human unity. It's
people pulling together,
uniting of forces from around your communities, and it's that outpouring of human kindness. To put it in a biblical perspective, it's acts of loving kindness, of what we call chesed, and it's just those acts are really the only treatment, the only healing that we can have from a devastation like this. And we're seeing it now. Like I'm seeing on social media, we're getting messages from people in Turkey on our social media channels saying, "Thank you for saving my neighbor. Thank you for saving, people in my community. Thank you for, just coming and showing that you care." And that's a huge message for, I think, the whole world.
Then it's excellent. We've been speaking to Raphael Poch. He's the international spokesman for United Hatzalah for Israel. It's Israel's fastest, first on the scene, first responders, EMTs, paramedics, others. And it's proven they've been doing this, I tell you, only 16, 17 years, but they've blanketed Israel and have this global reputation for being the fastest first responders out there. And they had a whole team in Turkey, and we've been helping support them. The funds that are coming in from Christians who are donating towards this are going to provide warm thermal clothing, and a lot of medical equipment, oxygen tanks, defibrillators. We have a whole list of stuff that we're helping supply. We're also going to be working with the Jewish Agency to help evacuate some of the Jewish communities that are in the worst impacted areas. There was a synagogue, an historic synagogue that got destroyed. Several things that we're doing in this region, but we really thank Raphael for coming and filling us in on the Israeli rescue mission from United Hatzalah, even from the IDF, from Command and others. Thank you for your time. All the best in all the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great.
Okay, that's going to be it for this week's ICEJ weekly webinar. We thank you for joining us for this show on Israel to the Rescue. We'll be back next Thursday at 4 o'clock for our next weekly webinar. Going to have an exciting topic for you then. Also, make sure to join us on next Wednesday, 4 p.m. Israel time, for our global prayer gathering. Join Christian leaders from around the world praying for Israel, for this region, and for your own nations. This is David Parsons with the International Christian Embassy saying shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next Thursday at 4 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media pages for more exclusive ICEJ content.